A popular YouTuber faces backlash over a charitable act. I'm Marco Perry. Welcome to the Perry Platform. A popular YouTuber who goes by the name MrBeast put out a video titled 1,000 Blind People See for the First Time. And that really is a pretty accurate description. Now, I've never seen a MrBeast video before, but apparently he's pretty popular. I think he might be the most subscribed to channel on YouTube, and he funded the operation of 1,000 people who had a sight problem so they could see again. As the video goes on, we see some of the people who are getting the operation before and after the surgery, and MrBeast even gives some of them a check ranging from $10,000 to $50,000. So, to most people seeing this, it seemed like quite an impressive thing. These were individuals who had an issue that could actually be resolved, but unfortunately, monetary considerations were stopping them from seeing again. That might be an indictment on the American healthcare system, but MrBeast took it upon himself to help these people, and that's good, right? Well, you may be surprised to find out many people were upset by this, and there was some serious backlash that came about. MrBeast himself even had to address the negativity. So PC Gamer magazine collected some responses, and I do think this captures the general negative sentiment that we did see. So one person writes, "It's deeply frustrating to have to rely on a benevolent content king making feel-good videos rather than addressing the root causes of these problems." Well, as we go through these comments, I will respond to each of them. This really is something quite silly. How is this frustrating to you? Now, it's true. He is a content king, and he's getting views from the video, but don't let that distract you from the fact that 1,000 people now have their sight restored. And you can talk about addressing the root causes of these issues all you want, but that's at a higher level of discussion. MrBeast himself is not going to pass laws to improve the American healthcare system. He's not going to reform the hospitals. But what he can do is pay for people to get an operation done. I find it comical because I can imagine this individual being very happy to applaud an activist, for example, who literally has done nothing except, quote unquote, raise awareness of these root causes. But at the end of the day, nobody has benefited from such a thing. MrBeast, on the other hand, has given people their sight back. And that upsets people. It really does speak to the internet culture that we're in, and we'll talk about that in a second, but I do want to move on to another comment here. Another critic writes that, "Imagine being blind and your only opportunity to stop being blind is to expose a very intimate, emotional moment of your life with millions of people for the sake of MrBeast." Well, that's just incoherent because obviously, for many people, this is not their only opportunity to stop being blind. If they wanted or were able to, they could pay for the operation themselves, but obviously they couldn't do so. Critics are acting like MrBeast holds the sole solution to blindness and he's restricted it to just these 1,000 people. That's obviously not the case. And further, I'm not hearing any of the participants expressing negative sentiments about being helped. This individual is doing a classic thing here where they're offended on somebody else's behalf. And the person who they're purporting to represent may have the complete opposite reaction. I'm sure these people were eternally grateful to receive this treatment, even if it came at the cost of being on a YouTube video, which really is a minimal cost to have a life-altering surgery given to you. We have another individual who calls this charity porn. They say that right at the start of the video, they say something about how 50% of blindness is curable. Then, to see them just dancing around like it's a talk show charity segment, infused with the vibe of moderate content tailored to our destroyed attention span, feels viscerally wrong. Well, I've got good news for you, my dear internet critic friend. Just don't watch. Nobody is forcing you to tune in. If you feel so repulsed at the premise of this video, just watch something else. There are many people who did enjoy seeing this and it did brighten their day. And once again, we're forgetting about the people who were helped. I'm not hearing them complain. This form of high ground morality is quite interesting. We've seen it time and time again when it comes to social media commentary. There are individuals who do nothing, who have done nothing, who have plans to do nothing, but still they're talking as if they are some type of holy author, some type of authority on the subject. Where do they get off condemning this act of charity? Because there's no two ways about it. Even though MrBeast stood to gain, it still was an act of charity. Don't forget, even the doctors who perform the surgery stand to gain something. Oftentimes they stand to gain a lot, a large check. Oftentimes the politicians who you're asking to produce systemic change stand to gain something, which is appealing to their voter base and getting voted back in. No matter where you drill down, there's always some type of motivation. And you do have to ask yourself, to what extent does that motivation matter? Versus looking at something like the outcome. And there actually are philosophical frameworks for quantifying this equation, which we'll get to in a second, but there is one more comment that will tie us into that talk. So, political analyst and philosopher Anand Giridharadas also mentioned some opinion on this matter. He says that he is going to warn against this pervasive societal habit of automatic gratitude and praise for elites who engage in various forms of do-gooding. The point is not so much that MrBeast has done demonstrable good, but the underlying reasons why he's done it in this way. That's interesting, but I do have to disagree with this philosopher. He's making the point that it is more important, in some ways, the reasons for the action rather than the outcome itself. Now, oftentimes the motivation does matter, but I think this is where many philosophers lose a lot of grace from the public. They're talking from a strictly academic viewpoint. They're trying to overanalyze the matter. What is the alternative here? Should we not praise MrBeast for helping these 1,000 people? Would it have been better if he did nothing for these 1,000 people? And, once again, there is no issue with MrBeast receiving some type of reward for this act. Unless these philosophers and critics are trying to put forward that everything good done in this world, especially by, as he's putting it, rich people, should or could be done with no self-interest, well, that's just naive. And further, you'd probably take away a lot of good done for the world through that. So by you upholding this really idiotic standard, you're going to cause much more harm. For example, if MrBeast did not think that this type of video would do well for him, he might not pursue the idea. And what happens then? These 1,000 people continue to be blind. Is that better? I don't think so. The most effective way to produce good outcomes given human nature is to align incentives with outcome. There's a reason why, for example, you can get a tax receipt for performing a charitable donation. It incentivizes people to donate more and to ultimately produce a good cause. If you remove all the incentives for doing good things and you encourage people to be more selfish, you're not overall helping anything. Maybe you're going to score some philosophical points in your theoretical debates, but in the real world, things operate differently, and tangible consequences matter. They matter a lot. To get philosophical, there is a branch of thinking called deontology where they place heavy emphasis on the means. They really care about the reasons. And then on the other side of the equation, there's consequentialism, where it's in the name. They care a lot about the consequences, not so much about the means. And obviously you can go too far in either direction here. Now, based on this commentary that I've been reading to you, it sounds like they've gone too far down the path of deontology, and they care very little about the consequences. But you can easily do the opposite too. You can care a lot about the consequences, but you don't care about the means, which is equally as dangerous. So there has to be a balance there. I don't think that the means, aka getting more YouTube views, is a terrible thing. It's actually a decent reward for MrBeast, and it produced a great outcome. It's called a win-win situation. Now, if deontology and consequentialism both go too far at times, what's a better way of thinking? Now, it's my opinion that philosophically, if you take the approach of measuring plausible alternatives, you can find the best case scenario. And plausible is a key word here. We're not talking about all alternatives because that would be infinite. We're talking about things that are likely to occur and alternatives. So look at the current situation. The MrBeast getting videos and clicks for this act of good. What is a plausible alternative here? Well, on one hand, he doesn't help the people because the video clicks aren't there for him. It doesn't make sense from a business standpoint. Is that good? Clearly not, because 1,000 people now are left to suffer. What's another plausible alternative here? It's hard to think of one. Would you consider it plausible, as some people commented, that MrBeast changes the very fabric of healthcare in America by himself? I doubt it. It's possible, but not plausible. Would you rather him invest time in quote-unquote raising awareness? Maybe you would, but as we can see through the many activists who do that already, it oftentimes doesn't bear fruit, at least not in the short term. It's a long march, and don't get me wrong, there is a benefit to doing so. But I don't see why one should then castigate an individual who would much rather take direct action. And as I did allude to before, this speaks to this highly moralizing, judgment-based social media landscape that we're currently in. You saw this happen at the peak of the Black Lives Matter movement. If individuals refuse to turn their profile picture into a black square, which honestly does nothing, aside from, quote-unquote, the activist's favorite line, which is raise awareness, supposedly, then you'd be the target of much malice. People would be holding you to this seemingly arbitrary standard of commitment to a cause. And we're seeing the same thing here. Many individuals who are highly moralizing, even though, if you look at their own performance, they likely have done nothing. They likely have helped nobody. But they still feel as though they're in a position to criticize those who are actually getting things done. I find that insane, and it does speak to where we are. From a philosophical standpoint, it seems like we're becoming more and more blinded. Think about the environment that these people are pushing for. One in which somebody who does a good thing and wants to show it off on social media is becoming the target of hatred. There are certain types of people who are going to be less inclined to do good acts now because there isn't a tangible benefit to them. And maybe you have an issue with that, but keep in mind the consequences. You're missing out on a lot of good stuff now. I'm sure the blind people had very little issue with having their sight restored for being on a YouTube video. And I'm sure that many people around the world who are starving right now would have very little issue if a Facebook post is made about them, if it means that they're going to have dinner tonight. I guess on one hand, though, there's always going to be people who are upset on social media, and perhaps that's a fact of life going forward. It's something to really think about. Now, with that, it does bring us to the end of our conversation for today. If you enjoyed the material, be sure to leave a review and share to help us grow. And you can find me online at perryplatform.org and on social media at perryplatform. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you soon.